Welcome to the deep dive. We're standing really at a critical point, facing challenges that demand we look deeper, understand what's truly necessary. And today, we're diving into something absolutely fundamental, but also, well, profoundly misunderstood.
Right.
Religion.
Right.
Our mission here is to unpack this really surprising distinction the source material makes between religion and theology.
Yeah, it's a key point.
And we want to explore why this insight is just so crucial for, well, for our survival, frankly, and how we move forward into the next century.
It really shifts the perspective.
It does. And what we found right off the bat challenges everything you think you know. Religion and theology, it turns out, are not the same thing, not even intimately related. So we're talking about this critical juncture for humanity, and our deep dive suggests there's a basic misunderstanding at play, that we've constantly mixed up religion and theology. So how do they really differ, according to these texts?
Yeah, it's fascinating because the texts draw a really, really sharp line. Theology, they say, is fundamentally about systems of worship.
Systems of worship. Okay.
Right, and these systems, they often come out of a competition of sources. Each one believes its way started from some direct divine experience. And historically, this has led to, centuries of struggle, different groups fighting over which is the holiest among them.
Competition.
Exactly, and crucially, this kind of theology doesn't always have roots in the, let's say, deeper philosophy of religion itself.
Okay.
Religion, though, is presented as much, much broader, more universal. It covers the idea that all human beings are essentially descended from one spiritual source.
Source.
Yes. It's described as man's inward conviction of the reality of a divine power. Now, that power could be seen as a being, a principle, maybe a law, or even a mystical experience.
So more personal, more internal.
Very much so. And the really profound point they make is that there is and can be only one religion.
Only one. Despite everything we see.
Despite everything, yes. The idea is that the evolution of this single underlying truth, that's what has given the impression of many different paths.
Wow. Okay, so if we've fundamentally misunderstood that distinction, religion as this universal conviction versus theology as these competing systems, what have the consequences been? Because it sounds like it goes way beyond just spiritual debates.
Oh, absolutely. Way beyond. This theological competition, it hasn't just, disturbed the religious world. The texts argue it has profoundly contributed to the miseries of our political and industrial systems.
How so?
Well, because it leads to us being very largely divided in our convictions about the realities of things, deep divisions. And the point is, unless we can somehow overcome this division in human conviction, getting to some kind of cooperative new world order of thinking, well, it just remains out of reach.
That's a huge implication. There's that anecdote you mentioned from the material, the one about the mosque attendant in Delhi, that seems to capture this perfectly.
Yes, it's a very telling story. It describes a visit to a mosque in Delhi. And after the tour, the attendant apparently turned to the person telling the story, smiled, and said, I don't believe that Muhammad could get in here.
Really?
Yeah. And it illustrates the point perfectly how beliefs can get so tied up in sanctions, meaning, they're sanctified not by truth, but by the authority of a descent of hierarchical personalities.
So rules and structures over the core essence.
Exactly. It just shows how rigid and, frankly, exclusive these theological systems can sometimes become. They can end up overriding the fundamental unifying core of what the texts call true religion.
Okay, this is where it really starts to click for me, I think. If there's genuinely just one underlying religion, why are we still so incredibly divided? Why does it feel like we're, as the sources say, even on the verge of holy wars again? It feels like we've just fundamentally lost our way.
Well, when you connect the dots, these ancient writings suggest that this deviation from true religion, it's a direct contributor to the global crises we're seeing now.
Okay.
The idea is that as materialism developed in society, the individual started to strengthen his own ego and weaken the universal plan.
Right, the ego.
Yeah. We effectively built this complete physical empire, declared it the ultimate truth, the only truth. But now it's falling apart from the obvious fact that it was not true. We've tried to dominate the universe, essentially, without really understanding it, or, crucially, ourselves.
And the results are just dire, almost apocalyptic reading some of this. The texts talk about humanity now being able to actually destroy itself.
That's exactly right. For the first time ever in all of recorded history, humanity is capable of destroying ourselves, not just wiping out nations, but literally turning this ball in space into an uninhabitable sphere.
Silly.
It is. And the texts are clear. This isn't some, grand divine plan unfolding. It's a grim result of human perversity that has destroyed the essential foundations of survival.
And they mention specific things.
Oh, yes. They point chillingly to nuclear fission, germicides, even manufactured plagues as examples of this awful capacity for self-destruction.
Wow.
And this spiritual decline, it's also mirrored, they argue, in the widespread miserable state of decadence we see in things like entertainment, literature, art. It's presented as a clear symptom of a society in overall decline.
And historically, this confusion, this deviation, has fueled immense suffering, particularly wars fought, supposedly in the name of God.
Absolutely. It's quite staggering when you look back. History shows that for centuries, right up until fairly recently, countless wars weren't just influenced by religion, they were often driven by it, directly motivated by theology. The sheer scale of suffering, all justified in God's name, it's mind-boggling. Think about the Crusades, for example.
Right.
Ostensibly, they were to rescue the sacred site of Jerusalem and Nazareth from the infidel. But as our sources really stress, we never made a crusade to take the infidel out of our own hearts.
That's a powerful line.
Isn't it? They highlight the terrible and tragic Children's Crusade, where thousands, just children, died. A stark example of failing to transform ourselves, instead just fighting external enemies.
And the source says we're basically repeating this.
That's the unbelievable part. After millennia of this suffering, these lessons, we find ourselves again on the verge of holy wars. And the observation is just. It is unbelievable that we can suffer so much and learn so little.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening right now? The sources seem to suggest the root of our problems isn't some external force, not demons or anything, but certain basic attitudes which the human being has carried with him since the beginning of his existence. Stuff inside us.
Exactly, which raises the crucial question. If the problem is internal, where's the solution? And the ancient texts are very direct here. They quote the Bhagavad Gita stating, "The mind is the slayer of the real."
The mind is the slayer.
Yes. It explains that the mind is constantly conspiring for its own advantages, always scheming. And in doing so, it ends up imprisoning the soul, creating and fostering false beliefs. This, the texts say, is our fundamental trouble, the victory of the mind over the soul.
Okay, so if the mind can be the slayer, then the soul must be the savior, right? How do these texts describe this inner power, the soul?
Precisely. The soul is described as the ultimate source of good within us. It is the repository of that good, which is necessary for the redemption of the personality. It contains the divine power to redeem ourselves.
The power is already there.
It's already there. The core message seems to be that inner space is soul, and it's high time, they suggest, for inner space to conquer outer space. This soul power is described as this most mysterious power that animates everything. It's present in all life.
And listening to that description, it sounds very much like the Christmas principle that our sources mention. Not just the holiday, but something deeper, like a sacrament.
That's a really perceptive connection. Yes, Christmas is presented exactly like that, as a sacrament. It's a symbol of the annual rebirth of the human soul, or perhaps of the divine soul, which is the substance of the human soul.
A rebirth.
An annual reminder, essentially, that we are always in the presence of our salvation. The texts really emphasize that we don't need external rituals, like being dipped or sprinkled to be baptized in a meaningful way. What we need is to be touched by the soul within ourselves.
An inner awakening.
Yes, that inner transformation, that victory of the eternal over the temporal, that's presented as the real path forward.
And this change, it absolutely has to start with each one of us.
Yeah.
Individually. There's no sort of collective shortcut, no escaping that personal responsibility.
No, absolutely not. The wisdom we're exploring really hammers this point home. The reformation of all things lies within ourselves, each person. We have to make our own statement of constructive belief and not just say it, but mean it and live by it.
Live the belief.
Exactly. It directly confronts this modern tendency we have to prioritize the right to do as we please, and it highlights the infinite consequences of personal selfishness, ambition, corruption that this attitude inevitably leads to. The message is stark. There is no escape from the immutability of a divine purpose. We face a really clear choice. Keep doing as we want to and perishing, or doing as we should and surviving?
Wow.
And the answer, it says, isn't trying to change society first. It's to change your own ideals, get inside of yourself, and find out what the lesson is that you should be learning.
This raises such a critical question then. If we are supposed to transform ourselves, what kind of world, what kind of legacy are we actually passing on, especially to the children of this new century?
Yeah, this is a profoundly important point in the text. They highlight this urgent need to instill spiritual values in children. We need to move beyond this common belief that materialism is the security of child life.
Right, that just having stuff makes them safe.
Exactly. They argue that ignoring true religion, these deeper values, in a young person's education, it simply interferes with the victory of corruption later on in society. It lets it take root.
So the focus isn't primarily on passing new laws or creating new regulations, but really on the fundamental bedrock of family and individual responsibility.
Precisely. These texts state it very clearly. The most natural and proper thing for young people is not that we shall pass a law. That's not the primary solution.
Okay.
Instead, it is the prime purpose, the glory of parents, to teach children how to live right, mainly by their own example.
Living it themselves.
Living it themselves. They even quote Confucius. No nation is more secure than the integrity of its private families.
Powerful.
And the wisdom extends this idea, noting that even employers have a kind of moral responsibility to measure and protect and integrate the characters of those who work for them. Yeah. Laws alone, it's argued, just can't fix deep-seated corruption. The change has to come from the individual heart, the family, the community.
And the Christmas tree, you mentioned that before. It's used as such a powerful analogy for this legacy, isn't it? The one we're building for the future.
It truly is a very evocative image. The idea is to imagine a tree for the Christmas of the year 2001, but looking forward, not just back.
Right.
A tree for the future. And this tree, it should contain the flowers of our love and our respect. It should hold the wisdom of a repentant people who have suddenly realized the mistakes of ages.
Wow. Repentant people.
Yes. It symbolizes passing on a heritage of experienced realities, of greater vision, and crucially, kindlier attitudes to the next generation, what we've learned, hopefully.
And the warning is equally stark if we fail to do that, if we pass on the wrong things.
The warning couldn't be clearer, really. We absolutely cannot pass on nuclear fission, poison gas, world bankruptcy, or the endless feuding of nations to the next generation. That would be, in the words used, blighting the unborn years.
Blight in the years.
Instead, what we must convey, what we absolutely have to cultivate and pass on, is soul power.
And that soul power, it needs to show up everywhere, right? In all aspects of our culture, not just in, explicitly religious or spiritual settings.
Absolutely. That's a key part of the argument. The texts really lament that currently the soul of music is not hard rock. The soul of art is not post-impressionism. The soul of literature is not one of present popular novels.
Strong words.
Strong words, yes. These are presented as signs of decadence, and we make, they say, a very tragic mistake if we just transmit this state of affairs, this lack of soul, to another century.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative is to actively seek inspiration, to demand for ourselves and from our culture to appreciate the good and beauty, and fundamentally to strive to live our own lives better, more authentically.
Okay, let's try and connect this back to the bigger picture then. If we accept this premise that there's really only one underlying religion, how do we actually bridge these huge chasms we see between different beliefs? How do we genuinely achieve unity?
Yeah, this is where that profound idea of one God, many names becomes absolutely central. Our sources keep emphasizing this. There are 72 names for God, but only one God.
72 names.
It's just an example figure, meaning many names. But they explain that all the major world religions, at their core, have a spiritual code or conviction that is basically identical in all of them.
Identical?
Really, basically identical, yes. Morally and ethically, these codes might change in, specific wording or customs, maybe due to environment or language differences, but the core moral and ethical message remains the same.
So the real problem isn't the underlying truth itself, but how we label it, how we conceptualize it. It sounds like we end up worshiping the names, not the reality behind them.
That's a really crucial insight the texts point out. The absurdity, really, of believing in God but rejecting Allah, or accepting Jehovah but dismissing Brahma, because, as they say, these are words, not gods.
Just labels.
Just labels. We often get caught up worshiping the names of things, not realizing that these things are one in spite of the diversity of the names. The actual spirit of God, they suggest, is something that just cannot be put into common words. It's too vast, too profound, which is why perhaps it's often better expressed through music or experienced in art, where the differences implied by words can be transcended.
And that biblical analogy you mentioned earlier, the camel going through the eye of a needle, that really brings it back to our own personal responsibility, doesn't it? It's not about the labels we carry.
It does, beautifully. The texts specifically use this analogy, referring to a small gate in Jerusalem called the Needle's Eye, to highlight that we cannot depend upon what we have to get this thing cleaned up. We've got to depend upon what we are.
What we are, not what we have.
Exactly. The camel had to shed its external load, its baggage, to get through that narrow gate. It's a symbol that it's our inner being, stripped of external possessions and, importantly, rigid accumulated beliefs, that allows for true change and connection to the divine.
So, okay, how do we actually experience this one true religion, this one God? Our sources seem to point to two main ways. The traditional ways of worship, but also something maybe deeper, mysticism.
Yes, they outline these two broad paths: the ways of worship, the established systems, and the ways of mysticism and revelation.
Revelation.
Meaning direct experience. And it's emphasized quite strongly that true religious unity doesn't come from agreeing on doctrine, but from the immediate experience of God, a mystical experience.
Oh, okay.
And this experience, they say, is present in all the great spiritual teachers of mankind. Those who truly experience it, regardless of their background, their tradition, they must finally come to the same conclusion. They don't teach according to fashion or, to take over countries. They teach to fulfill the destiny of the world's soul.
So ultimately, it really boils down to something quite simple.
Yeah.
Right action, based on this inner understanding, rather than getting lost in complex doctrines or theological debates.
Indeed, that seems to be the bedrock. The texts reiterate that in morality, if you act in a certain way, the consequences will follow and there is no way of escaping them. Natural law, essentially.
Lends it effect.
Exactly. And they state very clearly that we are not going to be made whole by preachment. Hearing sermons isn't enough. Instead, it's the discovery that the whole government lies within ourselves, discovering the right to live right regardless of anything, and actually finding joy to enjoy right living. The answer isn't in more external rules, but in understanding and embodying our own inner integrity.
This deep dive exploring these sources, it really brings home such a critical realization, doesn't it? That so many of our current global problems seem to stem from this basic confusion mixing up theology with true unifying religion. From ignoring our inner spiritual values and letting self-will and materialism just run rampant.
It certainly does. And it leaves us with a really urgent message, but also, importantly, a sense of clear potential. Our sources tell us we might have a period of a decade or more, a window, to choose to never use the terrifying arsenal of destruction we've built.
A choice we have to make.
A conscious choice. Yeah. And the solution isn't somewhere out there, it's right here, within us. Within ourselves is the power to make realities just as easily as we make disasters. If we have an endless style of doing it wrong, the texts assure us we also possess the infinite power to do it right.
Powerful words to end on, truly. So, if the victory of the soul over the mind is redemption, and as we heard, the soul in the human being is the repository of that good which is necessary for the redemption of the personality, then maybe the question for you to reflect on is this. What is the very first principle you will commit to living by, starting right now today, to activate that soul power within yourself?